Big welcome to our tuned-in viewers. Thank you for joining us for another iteration of the Irvine Gateway Experts Open for Business webinar series, an initiative developed to introduce foreign direct investors to our Irvine Gateway partners who are ready and willing to answer the most commonly asked questions when considering expansion to Irvine. This week's topic, operational preparedness. Our guest speaker, Brian Montez of Scalosity Works, is an expert on delivering talent solutions that accelerate growth, minimize risk, and create a high-performance culture. We are so excited to welcome this insight into the top 2020 U.S. workforce trends and how these trends will be reshaped in a post-pandemic world. As a reminder, you were able to ask outstanding questions you have for our expert through our Q&A Zoom feature. Just click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, submit your question, and we'll get you an answer at the end of the presentation. Without further ado, Brian, thank you again for your time. Please go ahead and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Well, thank you, Jessica. Excited to be on this and having this conversation today. So, as Jessica said, my name is Brian Montez. I'm the founder of Scalosity Works. And today, we're going to talk about the accelerated HR evolution. So, HR, workforce, talent management, whatever terminology you use to talk about your team and your workforce and personnel, it's always changing, it's always shifting, always evolving. So, but what we're going to talk about today is what does that look like in that post-COVID, post-pandemic world. So, my name is Brian Montez. I'm the president and founder of Scalosity Works, and we are an HR management firm. What we really focus on is creating collaborative work environments that are high engagement and high performance, right? Because culture drives a lot of what we do within our organizations. So at the end of the day, we're out to build better work environments. So let's chat for a few minutes about what we're going to talk about today and what we're going to cover. So we have 30 minutes, and we're going to move very quickly through a lot of high-level information. I want to start with a situational overview. Where were we at before this pandemic hit? Where were the trends starting to hit? And what are we going to start to, what's happening through this crisis? Then we're going to talk about the next chapter for an employer and employee experience, right? This is the organizational preparedness part. This is the component that we're going to talk about of what are team members and what are employees going to expect in this post-pandemic world? And what are you as employers need to be thinking about in a post-pandemic world? And we're also going to touch base on the next chapter for employment and labor laws. Now, we're not a law firm, we're not giving any legal advice today, but because we're so heavily involved in compliance and HR-related matters, it's very important for us to keep a pulse on all the employment and labor laws that impact businesses. So what I want to talk about today under that section is where do we see some of the new trends that will develop in terms of sick leave laws, FMLA, leave policies, things like that. Then we'll have time for question and answers, and then we'll talk about next steps. Okay, up that slide yet again. All right, so situational overview. So where were we going into this crisis? Well, the work from home situation was already a developing opportunity. Many employers were starting to allow the work from home environment to begin and allow certain positions to no longer be required to be in the office. And as we came into the pandemic, I found this very interesting term out there when I was reading a Forbes article. And the term was coined in 1987 by the Army War College. And I assume you say it as VUCA, but it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times, right? And then that has been applied now to the situation that we are in, right? Definitely volatile. Every day is a little bit different for us. The rules and how we operate our businesses are changing day to day. Definitely uncertain times, right? We don't know when we're going to be through this pandemic. We don't know if COVID's going to come back. We assume it will. But we don't know what other pandemics we're going to face. Definitely has made a very complex situation for us because businesses are now closed. We have essential versus non-essential, right? We have so many new different moving parts to how we run businesses. And ambiguous definitely applies, especially when it comes to some of the new labor laws that get drafted and put into motion during these times. So what we know is that we are now engaged in one of the fastest accelerators for workplace transformation, right? The workplace was already evolving, right? We've been focused on culture, we've been focused on soft skills, we've been focused on, creating more work from home opportunities. But this situation has taken that and magnified it, right? It's changing how we work, how we exercise, how we shop, how we learn, and it's going to also change where we work. And a lot of those changes are going to stay in place even after this pandemic has been, come to an end or, deemed over, if you will. So this transformation will change the employee experience. It's going to change expectations of employees and what they expect of their employer. and it is going to create a new landscape for labor and employment laws. So the top 4 trends that we see for the next normal on that employee experience organizational side, we see candidates will be seeking work from home opportunities more and more. And we're going to talk more about that as we move along. The topic of employee well-being is going to come out of the benefit category, and it's going to become something that's required to be part of your day in and day out operation. Right? Up until now, health and wellness has been a perk, a benefit, a nice add-on, if you will. Employee well-being is now going to become something that we have to live and improve every single day for our team. We're going to see a continued increase in training and development, and we're going to see skill-based hiring continue to displace pedigree hiring. All right, so trend number 1, the next chapter for the employee experience. The work from home is going to continue to expand. This has been the biggest experiment of our time in terms of going to a work from home remote situation. We know so many businesses that were forced to take their entire team of 20, 40, 60 people and take them out of the office and work remote if they wanted to keep their business going. These are businesses that had never run work from home before or remote opportunities. So in 2005 to 2017 is when we saw, expansion of work from home or remote work opportunities. So we saw an increase of 159%, which equated to, at that time, 3.9 million people working remotely. March of 2020, we saw that number increase to 4.7 million. I don't know what the numbers are today since the end of March and into April, many more companies went to work from home. But that's what we were seeing just as the pandemic was ramping up and we were moving into the stay-at-home orders. So we know that work from home was already a trend, and now as we come through this, we think that's going to be the new norm. Now, with that being said, as we look at what candidates are going to be looking for, if you are an international business and you are saying it's time for me to open up in the US, I'm going to plant my flag in my corporate headquarters in Irvine, right? What does that next normal look like as you're deciding how you're going to build your talent acquisition pipeline? Well, just a recent study of last year, so pre-pandemic, showed that 80% of job seekers would choose a job with flexible work from home policies over a job that does not. So that was pre-pandemic. And now with the emotional impact and everything that's happened to us because of this COVID crisis, we fully anticipate that more and more candidates will be looking for remote opportunities moving forward. It's going to become something that's required for them, not a nice to have. The other thing that's happened is the stigma around the idea that you're only productive when you're in the office, that has been challenged and has been decimated. Many employers now are seeing that, hey, my team can be productive when they're not in the office, when they're working remote, as long as we set up the tools and we build the systems so that we can track performance. It's very interesting. I had a lot of business owners last year that did not want to go to a work from home model or allow for any remote working. And, the fundamental belief of some of these business owners or executives, whoever you're talking to, the fundamental belief that they won't admit all the time is that if I can't see them, work's not getting done, right? We have to be face-to-face. The only way I know there's productivity is if we're face-to-face. And so last year I had a business owner, and he runs an e-commerce company, and he walked into his customer service office one afternoon, and he saw one of his customer service representatives watching a movie on her computer, her work computer. He called me and said, I just realized it doesn't matter where my team is working. They can be unproductive here or they can be unproductive remote. We have to change how we're doing things. So those are some of the eye-opening things that have happened through this experiment. So you as an employer, what do you need to be thinking about if you're going to redesign your organization to be prepared for that? Well, the reality is that not every business can be 100% remote. It doesn't work that way. Right? If you're a food manufacturing firm, if you're a life science company and you're building medical devices, you can't do that in your living room. So not every organization can be 100% remote. So what we look at in redesigning organizations is, can we make the organization a hybrid organization, right? So that we're only bringing essential staff into the operating facility, whether that's a manufacturing plant, an office, whatever that facility is, right? We start to take a deeper look at the roles and assess, can this role be done completely remote, or does it need to be in a facility of some sort? And so we build hybrid organizations, and that's what we're seeing right now with a lot of the manufacturing firms. The accounting department, sales, customer service, they've all gone remote. But the team that has to go in and build the widgets every single day, they still have to go in and do the job on site. So one of the things you can think about as you're looking to come into the US market and put your headquarters here in Irvine is consider what we call a hub and spoke structure. Okay, so that hub and spoke, well, let me take a step back one moment. One of the reasons that many people look at coming to Irvine is simply because we have so much talent in this area. So we'll talk about what remote hiring does in terms of opening up geographic locations. You can hire anywhere and find the best talent, but we have such good talent here in the Orange County, Irvine, greater Irvine area that we often don't have to go far to get the talent we need. But you can still consider building a hub and spoke structure. So the hub is Irvine, Orange County, and you may end up with a few remote employees that are based up in Ventura, a couple hours away, or far down south in San Diego. So you still have some remote employees that you bring onto the team because they're the best fit, but they're close to the hub, meaning that you can bring them in a couple days, a couple times a month for a couple days at a time. They don't have to jump on a plane to get down to the hub, right? So you still are able to bring them into the organization for face-to-face meetings, collaboration, relationship building, and everything that is definitely part of in-person meetings. So the hub and spoke structure is one way for you to redesign your organization to accommodate the work from home opportunities along with the need to be in a facility or some type of physical operation. Now, the other thing that you have to think about in your organizational preparedness is what is the physical office going to look like as we come through this? Okay, the physical offices that we had before will not be the same, right? Because coming out of this, we can't, say, and again, there's no magic date on when this ends, but say end of July, we get the all clear. The government says stay-at-home orders are lifted, we're good to go. We don't just go back to business as usual. So we know that because we've been hit with this, it can come back at any time. We don't know what other situations could come. Pandemic future. Now that we've had experience of this, we have no reason not to be prepared for the next go around. So redesigning that office to manage the future is what's going to have to happen. And it's already starting. So manufacturing plants have already been redesigned to allow for social distancing within the plant so that workers are 4, 5, 6 feet apart from each other while they're doing their job. Challenge with that is obviously it takes up a lot more real estate within the plant. So we have to get very creative in these manufacturing facilities and re-engineering them so we can have social distancing. Offices also will be revamped. I've walked into some offices before, tax offices, things like that, and very dense, right? You've got a lot of people very close to each other in cubicles. Okay, we're even looking at how do we redesign those physical office spaces so that social distancing is allowed. We also know that office cleaning is going to go to a whole new norm. We're seeing office cleaning companies pivot because it's not just dusting and going in and doing a light cleaning. Right now we're talking about, is it once a month, once a quarter, we have a medical grade deep cleaning come into our office, right? These are some of the things that will starting to happen and will most likely continue happening, and things you're going to have to plan for and budget for and build into your plan, because your employees are going to need to know that they have a clean, healthy space to go and work when they do have to go on site. The other thing that's going to become the new norm is the written pandemic response policies, right? It's going to become very important to add to your policies and procedures pandemic response policies. Right now we've written a COVID-19 response plan for manufacturing facilities. How do they prevent exposure? And if an exposure happens, what are the steps they have to follow once that person's been identified, right? So we have to have a full-blown plan laid out so that we know how to operate and can keep the business going if an exposure occurs. And it's also very important that once that is built out, all the employees are trained on it. So you're probably thinking at this point, great, if everybody's going to be looking for work from home opportunities, how do we hire for that? So it's not much different than hiring if they're going to come into your office or your brick and mortar facility, right? But what is going to be required is that you continue to build a strong employer brand, but that employer brand needs to be built and out there in the digital world. And it needs to be where your candidates are living and spending their time. If it's on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, right? Your employer brand needs to speak in the places where they are living and spending their time, because that's how they're going to find you and that's how you're going to find them. Some people say that, if you're going to hire remote, the hiring process should also be 100% remote. I don't necessarily agree with that train of thought. I believe that if you're going to hire remote positions, what I like to encourage is that we do some of those interviews, screenings, conversations in a remote environment, because we want to see how that person operates and see if everything works smoothly that way. But I still recommend in-person interviews if at all possible, right? Do, again, a hybrid, right? Because there's nothing replaces in-person meetings. And so I really encourage that hybrid approach. Regardless of whether you're hiring remote or you're hiring for inside the office, we encourage assessments to be used. And of course, design attractive and equitable compensation packages. The reason we put that in there is because we had a question a couple of weeks ago. And the question was, I'm hiring somebody and they live in rural Montana. They had the skill set, they were, very well qualified for the role. And the question that was posed to me was, do I need to pay them the same as the person that lives in LA? And at the end of the day, the recommendation we gave was, you need to design a package that is similar in nature, regardless of where that person lives. Because at the end of the day, you're getting the same level of work, the same level of skills, the same level of competency. So where they work should not be a reason to say, well, I'm going to pay you $20,000 less a year because you live in a rural area. So let's continue to design those packages so they're equitable regardless of where they're working, or where they're living, I should say. All right. The next thing that you need to be prepared for, is to continue your boost your training and development in remote working. So there are a variety of ways that we can increase that training, because not everybody is initially equipped to work remote. For a lot of people, it's a new environment and it takes some adjustment. So we would recommend implementing work from home training for both employees and the management team, because the management team needs to learn how to oversee, lead, and supervise a remote team. Provide a work from home guide. Microsoft did a great job of preparing a work from home guide. Jessica, if you want, I can send that over as a resource. It's built. It's a great resource that Microsoft put out there on working from home. They built it for their employees and then they put it out publicly for everybody. So we can certainly share that with you.
Absolutely.
Also would encourage you to create an employer resource group, an area where your team can get resources that they need. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And then also on the training and development side, let's be prepared to balance the emotional implications of knowing that they have to manage it all, right? All of these work from home, remote people, we've all got a new scenario working from home. We have new coworkers we didn't plan on, the spouse, the partner, the kids, the animals, right? So everybody, is dealing with a lot more working from home, and it takes a lot of strategy to make that all work. So we have to be prepared to balance those emotional implications. All right, the next trend that we see are going to be the involving employee expectations. Okay, what are job candidates going to expect from their employers, right? So coming into this pandemic, some of the changes we were starting to see is, people looking for employers, they wanted to understand, who is this employer? Who is the team? Who am I going to work for? What do they believe in? What is their why? What is their mission? What good are we going to do at the end of the day? Right? We know that people that are looking for opportunities, it's more than just a paycheck. And that trend was already starting pre-pandemic, right? Choosing who you're going to go work for and work with and their why was just as important as what was the compensation package going to look like. And in some cases, even more important. But one of the things that we're definitely going to see as we come through this pandemic is a new focus on worker well-being. As we talk to organizations' employees, they are genuinely concerned about their health and well-being. So you've got the workers that are at home, that are isolated. And then you've got the workers that have to go out to the manufacturing facilities or still some offices, things like that. And they're concerned about, what happens if I get exposure at work? What are we doing here at work to keep us all safe? So the health and well-being category coming into this pandemic was considered a perk or a benefit. If you were able to put together gym memberships or healthy eating options that you would bring into the office, things like that. That was a perk or a benefit. That was a nice to have. But what's going to happen as we come through this is the emotional well-being and the mental health aspect is going to become paramount for us to continue navigating. So employee health and well-being needs to become something that we deal with day in and day out, and not just a side thought or a perk. It needs to be a key component of the employee experience. So as we move beyond just the physical health of our team members, we're going to have to support mental health initiatives within the operation. And that's going to require us to redesign and retool and bring in resources to the operation, to the organization. So what are 10 ways we can support employee mental health? Well, again, create that employee resource group. And what that resource group is it's going to have things for them to access, right? Podcasts, articles, numbers, information, things that they can go to and say, hey, I'm looking for this, here it is, right? So we create that employee resource group for them. Implement more frequent leadership town halls and check-in conversations. Okay, the communication with a work from home team and even a team that's on site, the communication definitely needs to continue to increase with transparency. Okay, consider engaging mental health specialists to host online Q&As. Okay, the impact of what's happened to everybody, to all of us, doesn't go away when the stay-at-home orders are lifted. These things are going to live on in our minds for quite some time, and we are going to have to manage that as employers. Okay, communicate frequently about, if your organization has assistance programs, continue to make sure those are communicated and that people don't forget about that as a resource. Okay, create additional social channels for your team to connect. It's extremely important, especially if you have a hybrid team where some people are on site, some are remote. It's very important that they still build relationships. So whether you're using Slack, Teams, whatever platform you guys are using for your communications, create some social channels within that so that they can have conversations with each other that are not work related. Okay. Consider implementing a mental health hotline so that employees and their families have access to mental health professionals. Okay. Communicate updates to sick leave, PTO, and other benefits are available. If you have a physical operation, consider creating a local solution and a task force that's trained, your team, some of your employees, some of your team members, but a task force that is specifically trained to deal with, a pandemic exposure or whatever the issue is, right? That they are able to deal with it, they're trained on it, and they can handle it when it happens. Okay, curate the list of online wellbeing resources that would go into your employee resource group. Last but not least, when you're having conversations with the team, don't shy away from the fact that, emotions, we're human, anxiety, it exists. Make that part of your conversation and build that relationship with your team. We believe we are going to continue to see a doubling down, okay? We are all going to become very protective of our team. We're going to become very protective and make sure that our workplaces are clean and sanitary, and we're doing everything we can to protect them from a health standpoint. So we're going to get very protective over the physical and mental well-being of our team members. We have to. We also know that pre-pandemic, organizations were spending more and more on what we call L&D, learning and development. That is going to continue to expand. Organizations are going to continue to expand in their people and expand in their future. Performance is going to become the mantra. FaceTime will no longer be a measurement for workplace productivity. Even for those team members that come back into the physical environment, okay, punching a clock does not get it done. This experiment and this whole situation has made a lot of people realize, not everybody, made a lot of people realize that performance is really what we have to be focused on and not hours punched in. Okay, which is going to require you as an employer to build performance management systems. Those are absolutely necessary, whether you have remote workforces or whether you have teams in-house. Performance management systems are absolutely required. Separate conversation for a separate day. The hiring trends will continue to shift. Okay. So before this crisis started, we already were seeing major employers start to say, you know what, maybe that 4-year degree is not as important. We're going to start looking at other skills. Okay, so we started to see this trend already developing. So that trend now is going to continue to accelerate coming out of this, especially with colleges, high schools, and everything, of the interruption they've had in being able to deliver their learning paths. Okay, so hiring for specific hard skills will become more of the norm. Hiring for soft skills, which was already very important, is going to become even more important. And finding a way to bring in people with some of those soft skills or do that training on the job as they're coming in. And that pedigree hiring, I believe, will continue to decline. Right? We have a lot of great tier 1 schools here in the US. There's a lot of very good, talented workers that didn't go to a Harvard or a Yale or some of those other schools that are just as qualified, capable, and will bring just as much value to the organizations. The other trend that we know we're going to continue to see is the learning and development trends. Pre-COVID-19, learning and development was gaining steam, especially remote learning and development. We have a lot of great partners out there that do it, like Brandman University there in Irvine. We've partnered with them before. So a lot of great learning and development options are out there. We know we're going to see continued investment in learning and development delivered in a digital format, whether that's leadership training, whether it's upskilling, cross-skilling, reskilling. The digital learning and the learning development is going to continue to expand to make sure that the entire workforce continues to evolve. Okay, so let's talk about the labor and employment laws and what we see or what we believe is going to happen as we move forward with the landscape here. Now, one of the things to remember is that there's different layers of organizations, governmental organizations here in the US. So you've got federal, you've got state, you've got county, you've got city. So even though you're looking at putting your operation in Orange County, Irvine, it's still very important for you as an employer to understand what are my responsibilities as an employer to all the different legislative laws that come into play. So what we do believe we're going to see as a continued trend or as an expanded trend is an increase in legislative and executive orders that continue to expand employers' obligations to provide PPEs, protective equipment, and workplace safety protocols. So our operation facilities, they may have to permanently wear masks, face masks now, right? There may be things that we will have to legally continue to do for the long term. The workplace safety protocols as well, right? The 6 feet of social distancing within a plant, that may become required. So we believe we're going to see an expansion of some of these laws and executive orders around trying to minimize exposures and future problems. And again, from an organizational preparedness standpoint, you have to be ready to navigate federal, state, county, and city ordinances, and also understand which laws are going to sunset and which laws are going to be permanent. We're going to talk about that next. So one of the first laws we saw hit was at a federal level, which was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, FFCRA for short. What that did is it provided workers with 2 weeks of sick leave if they get exposed to COVID, have to take care of somebody that has it. There's a whole list of criteria. Point being is this particular act is temporary. It was implemented in, I think it was early April, maybe late March, but as of right now, it's designed to sunset, meaning it's going to end on December 31st. So this is not a long-term law. Now, it's very possible, what we anticipate is it's either going to be extended or a new version of it will come out, right? And that's going to be different than regular sick leave policies that are out there. So now we're navigating more than one type of sick leave policy. Then you get down to city resolutions, right? So you have federal, you have state, you have county, and then you can have cities as well. City of Irvine put a resolution in on April 8th, right? And what they were recommending is that all retail businesses are providing PPEs for their employees, and that if you go to pick up food at a restaurant, take out, go to the grocery store, that you as a consumer are also wearing a face mask. So we have, resolutions at the city level all the way through the federal government. So it's very important for us to understand how all those fit in together, regardless of where you're doing business. The other conversation that's going on quite frequently now is what does the future look like in terms of expanded testing of employees? So up until this pandemic started, the thought of temperature checking an employee, we never had this discussion because temperature checking is considered a medical exam. So pre-pandemic, this could only be done by a trained medical professional. As of March 18, 2020, the EEOC, which is our Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, relaxed that and said, employers, you may now test for temperatures for employees coming into your work site. So now we see many of our operations that are manufacturing or have employees on site. As that team comes in the morning, they get a thermometer check before they can start working. Now the key here is they have to punch in and be on the clock before we can take their temperature. So a few months ago, we never would have thought about doing that. So the other implication that you have to think about with this is these are now technically and legally medical records, meaning that as every day as employees' temperatures are taken, We have to file those in a safe and secure place. It cannot be commingled with their other personnel files, and we have to treat them like medical records. The other conversation that came up last week is the testing of COVID on site, right, with these 10-minute tests that are being developed. And we have companies asking, can we do that? And again, up until recently, testing for anything on site without, a medical professional handling anything was never going to happen. As of last week, we saw those rules start to get released as well. So the question that we have to evaluate is this a permanent thing, right? Will now we have the approval to test 5 years from now? Or will this end at the end of the year as well? And that's what we don't know. We don't know how far or how long this particular expansion of medical testing on site is going to go on. But it begs the question, how do we balance our team's rights with employers' rights and trying to keep everybody safe? So those are the trends that we see, and those are some of the ways that you'll need to be thinking about being prepared for your organization as you enter the U.S. market and come into the Irvine, Orange County area, and some of the things you need to be thinking about. So
I hope you found his presentation informative. I know I did. I learned a lot more about what's going on in the working environment in the U.S., more than I knew before. So hopefully that helped in your preparation for expansion to the U.S. I did want to let everyone know that we will have another webinar installment, which will be covering the U.S. healthcare market entry, held by Cynthia and Zenobia from Central IQ and the XIQ family of companies. So it'll be really interesting, really boiling down a lot of complicated material and information into something that's easily processed so that you can better prepare yourself for expansion. They'll be covering the trends and disruptive forces when navigating the U.S. healthcare market and provide insights, implications, and imperatives for short-term and sustainable success.